Welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. We're excited. We've got a full slate. Looks like we've got a lot of participants, which is fantastic. That's what we're always looking for. Tonight, we're going to learn how historical papers can be a valuable tool in breaking through your genealogical brick walls. Newspapers, as you all may know, often print birth announcements, wedding announcements, and obituaries, but they also are incredible resources and just the tip of the iceberg for learning more about your family. And now that newspapers.com has a lot of our local newspapers included in their collection, we thought it'd be a good time to bring in Jenny Ashcraft, who I'm introducing right now. Jenny's an avid genealogist, senior writer, and researcher at newspapers.com. She'll share some tips on how to uncover the context and stories of your ancestors' lives through the historical newspapers on newspapers.com. If you can hold all of your questions, actually, if you can type any questions that you might have as she's going through the webinar to me, I will make sure that she answers any questions right at the end. And then I'm just going to, I think, hand it off to Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, and welcome to Ontario.
Thank you. I love Canada. My son-in-law is from Canada, from Alberta. So thank you. I'm so happy to be here and happy for this invitation. Let me just say, I am so grateful for people like you. In my work as a genealogist, I'm working with societies like yours often, and I'm just so grateful for your preservation of records and history because it makes such a difference. So thank you. You know, I don't know if anybody in this group has ever been to a big genealogical conference in Salt Lake City called Roots Tech, or if you've ever even heard of it. But I remember visiting Roots Tech a number of years ago. That, if you remember that movie, that Bruce Willis movie, Sixth Sense, it was kind of a big thing. And I walked into Roots Tech and I saw this group of people with roller bags rolling their records around, and they all had matching t-shirts on that said, "I seek dead people." And I started laughing and I thought, these are my people. So I say the same thing to you. You are my people. I just thank you for all of your efforts in preserving history and keeping these important records and histories safe. So thank you so much.
It'll
Amanda,
right back at you.
oh, thank you. You know, Amanda told you a little bit about me. I'm a senior writer at Ancestry, and I am a passionate genealogist, and I possibly might be newspaper.com's #1 fan. I love the product so much. I have made so many discoveries about my own family. I've been able to learn about marriages and deaths. I've discovered children that were not in my family tree that were born and died in between census years. And there was no other record of these children. There was not a birth record and not a death record. And without these historical newspapers, we wouldn't know that they even exist. I've learned about my ancestors' triumphs and tragedies. I love newspapers for learning details about my female ancestors because we know sometimes they are challenging to research. It really has been a critical tool for me to break through some of those brick walls. As genealogists, we all love those vital records, and we know how important those are, the birth and the death and marriage records and census records. They're essential. But what newspapers do is they help tell a story of our ancestors. They provide a context. Why did our ancestors move? Why did they immigrate? How did they die? What was happening locally that impacted my family? How did national and international events shape my family's history? So many of those whys are answered in newspapers. They really help me, and I think if you explore this with your own families, understand kind of the personalities, and that is priceless. I love that. Maybe some of you have made discoveries in the 1931 census. Well, newspapers can add to those discoveries and provide a context and a story for what was happening in your ancestors' lives. I'll tell you a little bit about newspapers.com. It was established in 2012, and it has grown to become the largest online newspaper archive. There are papers from the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Panama. I think I've got them all there. Anyway, they date back to 1690. And right now we have about 955 million newspaper pages on the site in our archives, and we're on track to reach 1 billion probably sometime mid to later summer. So it's an exciting time. We add several hundred papers each month. We just added 2 Ontario papers this month, and I'm happy to report that there's some works in the pipeline. I think you're going to see some more probably in the next couple months. It's very easy to search the site. I'm going to show you how. And when you find something that's interesting to you, you can create a clipping to save it. And you can save them, you can share them, you can attach them to your ancestry tree. And I'm going to walk you through all of that. It's important to note when you create a clipping, that clipping becomes free. So if you want to share that with somebody who's not a subscriber to newspapers.com, once you've created a clipping, it generates a link, and that clipping is viewable by anybody. So you can share these with your family on social media, in a Facebook group, or any way that you want to generate a link so they're shareable. I want to walk you through the site, and then I thought it would be fun to embark on a little bit of research together. So I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to go to the home page. Okay, Amanda, are you seeing that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is the home page, and you'll see right here at the top, we have 3 boxes, which are keyword, date, and location. And this is where you're going to start your searches. One thing I want to point out, you are in Canada, and at the very bottom of the page here, my locale is the US because that's where I'm based. Yours likely has Canada. So what that means, and I could change this, I could make Canada my locale, but what that means is generally when I put in a search, my results are going to have US results first, and then other countries second. So you could set that locale to wherever you want to be. I'm guessing you want to have that on Canada with your Canada results first. So right here, we enter a keyword, and this is where you're going to want to put a name or a keyword of an event. And I'm going to just start a little search here. So I thought it would be fun. Let me get in there. Okay. We're going to just search your organization. And you might wonder, why did I just put quotation marks around this? And I'm going to tell you why. If I had an ancestor named John Miller, which I do have an ancestor named John Miller, and I put John Miller in the keyword search box and searched anywhere that had a John or a Miller, it would return those results. And so that could just be millions and millions of results. And so in order to narrow it down, if I add quotation marks, and I can add several keywords like I've done here with OGS and Niagara Branch, it will only return search results where those words appear together. So I'm just going to do a search here. And you'll see, well, I have 842 matches. It says right there on the left side. Again, my results have returned US first, but I'm going to filter right here and change that to Canada. I could also just type in Canada right here in one of those 3 bars. Again, with the dates, I could add a specific date if I have an ancestor that died in you know, 1897, I could search for 1897 there, or I could add a range. I could, you know, just slide this and make it any range that I wanted. But I'm going to just leave. Whoops, I don't really want to search that range. So I've got Canada here, and you can see that I can actually filter even more. So I'm going to go here, even though there's only one result outside of Ontario, I'm going to filter it to the Niagara Region County. So I now have 322 matches for your organization. So I can just kind of flip down here until I find something that I might want to look at. And I want to see what this is. So I'm going to click in here. I'm looking at a 1991 paper, the Niagara Falls Review, page 9, and it's talking about your organization. And it's talking, this right here says genealogy is popular. Let me make that a little bigger so you can see it better. So just in case you didn't know, it's the third most popular hobby after stamps and coins. But let's say that this was an article that was important to me and I want to save this article. I'm going to show you how to clip it and to electronically clip this out of the newspaper. And to do that, right up here, you'll see a little button with some scissors and it says clip. And when I click on that, a text box comes up and I can drag this around anything that I want to save. If I wanted to save the entire article, I could zoom way out and, you know, save the entire thing, you know, or I could zoom in and just save a portion of it. But let's just say we're going to save this article about genealogy being popular. Let me zoom up here. And I just, you know, clip whatever I want to. Then I come over here to the right side, and here's where I'm going to title my clipping. So if I was looking for my ancestor, and this is John Miller, I could say John Miller obituary, or John Miller gives birth to, John Miller and wife give birth to a baby. So I could name this clipping anything I want. I'm going to say genealogy is fun. And then right down here, I have an opportunity to create a tag. Now, a tag is really helpful if you are doing a ton of research and you want to organize your clippings. So if I wanted all clippings related to a specific person, I might choose to add a clipping with their name. These are some recent tags I used. I was searching for my father-in-law's World War II records. I was doing some research on the Lusitania, but right here I could, you know, I'm just going to say this is John Miller. We'll pretend it is. I could create a new tag that says John Miller. And then every time I search for any clipping related to John Miller, I can just attach that tag. Then I have an opportunity now to view my clipping. So I could, if I decide I don't want that title, I can edit it right here, but I'm going to just view it. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you create a clipping. So this is right here. You have your source information. You have the paper, you have the page. You can kind of see where on the page I have clipped. Here is my actual clipping. Now I have some choices along here, what I can do with this clipping. If I wanted to save this to my ancestry tree, I could do that. And I could go in here and find John Miller. Okay, I'm just going to choose one, but I've got to remember to go and delete this from history. But I'm going to just attach this to John Miller. And now it's exactly like you're attaching another ancestry record. I'm just going to save that to his record. And now it's going to be on his profile.
Sorry,
could,
Penny.
yes.
Yeah, it didn't show your pop-up window.
Oh, it did not.
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to try that again. Okay, I don't know why. Let me try. Okay, I think I'm going to have to share a different. Let me stop my share. Thank you for telling me.
No worries.
Let me stop that share and find the right one to share. Okay, do you see that now?
I can see it now. Yep.
Okay, thank you for telling me. Okay, so right here, I could go in and attach, let's pretend this is for John Miller. I'm just going to attach it. It's exactly like you attach any other ancestry record. I choose which person I want to attach it to, and I save. I could change the title there, or I could, I could add it to, if this is an article about 3 people, I can add each of those people here, and I save. And now that appears on his timeline. Okay, I'm gonna stop that share and go back to my original screen real quick. Okay, are you seeing that okay, Amanda?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's how I could save that to Ancestry. Now, let's say that I don't have an ancestry tree, or I want to share this in another way. Here's some options. I can copy the link, and I can use and put this link in, share it in an email. I could share it to Ancestry. I could just email it. Will bring up something that just allows me to email it right there. I could delete this clipping if I've decided this really isn't about him, or again, here I can edit it. So you can see that there's a number of ways that I can do that. So what I thought might be fun to do is to choose, let me go back to the home page here. Okay, I thought it would be fun to choose a person that we could try to build a little story about. And I don't have any ancestors in Ontario, so I thought I would just start skimming through some of the papers. And as I did that, I came across a story, and I thought this was kind of a fun little story. This appeared in a Buffalo newspaper in 1911. And I started reading this clever little story. And according to this article, it says this man was the very first man to plunge over Niagara Falls in a barrel and survive. And I started reading this funny little story. He did it. He was not a local Ontario guy. He did it to make money. He had all of these motion picture cameras apparently stationed everywhere to try to get a picture of him going off the falls. And I love here, I'm sitting here reading. All of a sudden, we went up and raced down. Well, thinks I, here's for a go. It's such a funny quote. But he goes down, he makes it, he's alive, but his barrel is washing up on some rocks. So it says that the Maid of the Mist was driven up close as possible by Captain Richard F. Carter. So I don't know who Richard F. Carter is, but I'm thinking, well, he's got to be a local Ontario guy. He's got to be from Niagara Falls. So I'm going to just do a little research on Richard F. Carter. I want to see who this guy is. So I'm going to go back to my homepage, and I'm going to search him. And I'm going to use those quotation marks again so that I'm not returning any results except for where those names appear together. If I didn't have the quotations, any Richard, any Carter would come up. So I'm going to search for Richard F. Carter. And I'm going to filter this to Canada. And I'm going to go, you can see right now that in Canada, I have 11 results for Richard F. Carter. But I'm going to go ahead and just zero in in Ontario. And I see a number of clippings here. Well, some of them are catching my eye. I see that he's Maid of the Mist is here. So I know this is my guy. So I'm going to just click into this and look at what this is. And it's just talking about Captain Richard F. Carter. And he's been working on the Maid of the Mist. So I think, okay, I do want to learn a little more about Richard F. Carter. So I went through and I have gone in there and I have searched for a bunch of clippings. And what I wanted to do is kind of share what I searched for and how I kind of constructed, or I guess reconstructed, the story of Richard F. Carter's life. And I'm hoping that you can use this, although I mean, it would make my heart sing if one of you was related to Richard F. Carter, but assuming none of you are, I'm hoping that this translates and gives you ideas for your own ancestors on how you might be able to do some searching for them. So the very first article, and I'm going to show you these in chronological order. So you can see that this is from a Buffalo paper in 1883. And what I want to show you here is it says Mr. R.F. Carter, the late mayor of Niagara Falls. Well, wow, that tells me quite a bit of information right now. He's either passed away or he is no longer the mayor, but he was a mayor of Niagara Falls. And this is very common back in the 1880s. People wrote testimonials about different healthcare things, and he's probably because he was somebody of note. He was asked to give a testimonial of this medicine, and that's what he's doing here. But here's what I want to point out. If you'll notice, it does not say Richard F. Carter. It says R.F. Carter. And if you recall, when we first did our search, we put in Richard F. Carter. And this did not come up. This was not a result that we found. But now that I see that sometimes he's referred to as R.F. Carter, well, now I know I want to be sure and do a search that way. I want to conduct a search with R.F. Carter in addition to Richard F. Carter. Okay, let's go to the next clipping. Now, this is the following year, 1884, and it's a want ad. And it says, plumber wanted, a good, steady man, and it's applied to R.F. Carter and Company. Well, this tells us a little bit about, he's obviously got something to do with he wants to hire a plumber. I learned as I did a little research that he was a merchant and he ran a store, and he sold tin products and copper products, some plumbing fixtures and water things. And so he was needing to hire a plumber. So not only does that tell me a little bit about his life, but he has a company. So I have R.F. Carter and Company. That's another thing I'm going to want to search. I want to know what this company is, and maybe I might find some different results if I search that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, here we are into 1908. Captain Richard F. Carter, Mayor, Niagara Falls. Well, we already saw that he was mayor. Well, apparently he is elected mayor again. So he's twice the mayor of Niagara Falls. And he won in 1908. And here is another thing I want to point out. It's calling him Captain Richard F. Carter and Captain Carter. Those are two search terms I'm going to want to try. If I was only searching for Richard F. Carter, maybe I might not see this, but maybe by searching Captain Carter, maybe other articles are going to filter to the surface that I might have missed before. Well, here we are on to the following year, and his time as mayor is short-lived because he's already defeated 1 year later. But again, this is telling us a little bit of something about his life. And, this is a guy that's involved with the community. So that tells, that helps me kind of construct his story a little bit. Okay, the next clipping is another 1909 clipping. And it says that Captain Richard F. Carter is 25 years on the job of commanding the ship of Maid of the Mist. And that we find out that he made his very first trip on June 4th, 1874. And 10 years later, he was put in command of the boat. Well, if this is my ancestor, this is cool information that tells a little bit of a story about his life. I love this last line. It says, he is a walking encyclopedia of the waters on the lower Niagara. So, wow, if that is my ancestor, that is cool. That's interesting to learn that kind of information about him. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And it's going to be for all of us who are searching for women. So often in historical newspapers, women were not listed by their own name. Occasionally, I always search it because you never know, but most often in historical papers, they were listed under their husband's names. So here we see that Mrs. Richard Carter And here's an amazing clue of Morrison Street. So we have a street, we have an address, and I will tell you that in another clipping, we learned that they live at 12 Morrison Street. So, wow, now we have an address, and here's something that I have to kind of consider. She's gone for a 3 weeks visit at Dansville, New York. Well, back then, papers often wrote who was coming and who was going. So that's a clue to me. I'm going to want to head over to those New York papers and I'm going to see who she's visiting. And maybe she has, a relative living there. Why is she going for 3 weeks to Dansville? Am I going to learn something in the New York papers? So that's what I'm going to learn from that clipping. Okay, this next one is 1911, and I love this, and I'm going to tell you why. So we have Captain R.F. Carter. Now notice that sometimes we see Captain spelled out and sometimes we see it abbreviated. So I'm going to make sure that I do searches with every variation of a name that I can find. I'm going to try Captain Carter and Captain with a period Carter, Captain R.F. Carter, Captain Richard F. Carter. I'm going to try every variation. Take out the F altogether. Captain Carter, Captain Richard Carter. Just try every variation. Well, I see here that Captain Carter has gone hunting. And I want to know who he goes hunting with. So let's take a look at some of these names. And I want you to remember some of these names. We're going to see this name Seymour. And then Captain Carter, there's a Fred Carter. Well, is that a brother? Is that a son? Who is that? I'd be interested to know. So I'm just going to kind of make a mental note of the names listed in this article about Captain Carter. It says they went on a hunting expedition to fields, and there is a post office there, a hotel, and a blacksmith excuse me, I cannot speak, a blacksmith shop in a thriving municipality. And they shot 70 birds, and Fred Carter shot a large black bear, which they brought back in triumph. So it's just kind of a fun little, what was happening in their lives in November 1911. But I do want to note these names, Seymour and Fred Carter and T.M. Ryan. I'm going to see if those surface anywhere else. Okay, so here is the following year in 1912. And this is just a fun little article. Apparently, Captain Carter was taking his cruise on the Maid of the Mist, and the boat got stuck on some rocks, and it became very, very dangerous. And he has never had an accident in all his time captaining. So he is very, very skilled. He figures out how to work the ship off the rocks. But just to be safe, he has everybody don life jackets, and he has some small boats launched to take all the survivors. But because of his skill, he's able to get off the rocks and return everybody to safety. So his perfect record stays intact. So, that kind of shows a little bit about, here's a guy who's calm under pressure, and that shows a little bit of his personality. I thought it was kind of fun. Okay, this next clipping is another tip. Now, we know from a future clipping that the Carters live at 12 Morrison Street. Well, it is a lot of old papers included addresses, and you can find the coolest thing if you search for the address. So you'll notice in this clipping, there is no mention of a Carter. But we know at this time the Carters were living at 12 Morrison Street. So that was one of my searches in quotation marks. I did 12 Morrison Street, and I found a slew of clippings about the Carters, and some weren't mentioned. They weren't even mentioned by name. But here's another little insight into the Carter family. I don't know if this is Mrs. Carter or one of the children, but we have a musician in the house, and somebody's teaching children how to play, or anyone how to play the violin or the mandolin. And it's saying, if you're interested, apply at our home at 12 Morrison Street. Okay, a couple more clippings here. This is 1921, and we see the obituary or the death notice of Martha C. Carter. So this is the first time we've learned the name of Captain Carter's wife, and we learned that her name is Martha Constance, the wife of Captain R.F. Carter, And this funeral was held at the residence of 12 Morrison Street yesterday afternoon. Well, what I'm going to take from this clipping, we have an officiant. We know who conducted this ceremony. So maybe I could do a little digging. Maybe I could figure out what church was Canon Guy B. Gordon officiating from. If I can learn the church, maybe I could look into some church records. I learned that she is buried at Fairview Cemetery. Well, that's another great clue. There's probably some cemetery records. So all of these things are wonderful clues, but I always pay attention on a death notice on who the pallbearers were, because they're generally people that are close to this family. So we have somebody named John Watt, we have J.H. Cummings, John Webster, W.J. Seymour, Cecil Seymour, and G.M. Carter. And if you remember, some of those names are familiar. We've seen those names. So we know that this name Seymour, this name Webster, G.M. Carter, these are people that are connected with the family. And if I'm building a tree, here's two articles now where these families are pretty closely tied. So I want to know, are they just friends? Maybe these are people that are in the family. So these are all things that I can learn from an obituary. Okay, now we have the obituary of Captain Carter. This is October of that same year, 1921. And here for the very first time, we see that his name, that F stands for Frederick, Richard Frederick Carter. So I'm going to want to make sure I do some other searches for Richard Frederick Carter. But it tells some wonderful things about his life here. It says he was 76 years old, so we have an age. His wife died just a few months earlier. He came to Clifton when he was 15 years old and has lived here continuously ever since. And he went into business and he worked in hardware and plumbing business. And he had a business partner that's named, and that he was the first, built the very first Maid of the Mist, and he was the captain until 5 years ago. And he founded an electrical business, and it's now owned by his son. And he ran another business, Carter Electrical Company. And I hope I hope the wheels are turning and you're seeing, oh, those are all things that I can search for. I can search for Carter Electrical. I can search for his business partner. I can try to take all of these little pieces of a puzzle and try to put it together in the life of Richard Carter. It says he was a mayor twice, in 1882 and 1908, and he was a water commissioner. And well, here's some great information. He was involved with a bunch of fraternal circles. He was in the Clifton Lodge and the Royal Arch and an Odd Fellow. He was a conservative. And here is he was a member of Christ Church. So, maybe that's the same church his wife was a member of. So I have a pretty good clue that I'm going to want to go look at Christ Church and see if I can learn a little bit more. But here we get into the gold of death announcements, and it's his survivors. He's got two sons, Fred W. and Harry E. And then he's got 5 daughters, so 7 children. The first one is Mrs. W. J. Seymour. Do you remember that Seymour name in all of those clippings before? Well, Seymour's was his daughter's husband, and they live in Niagara Falls. And he's got a daughter named Mrs. J.H. Cummings. Well, we saw Cummings in another clipping, and they live in Toronto. We don't yet know the daughter's name, but this is a great clue. We have a Mrs. John Webster in Montreal. So I'm going to want to head over to the Montreal papers. I'm going to want to head over to the Toronto papers. And he's got Mrs. Mattie Clendening and Blanche at home. Now, Blanche at home means Blanche is likely not married. And the funeral is taking place at 12 Morrison Street. On Sunday, he's being buried at Fairview Cemetery. So all of these things are so many clues onto other things that I can do searches on. Okay, we have here a little notice, the following, a little after his death, that talks about his burial. And it says his funeral was held at his home, and that the Reverend Guy B. Gordon, remember that from his wife's, the rector of Christ Church, and that it was held at the family home, and that he was buried at Fairview Cemetery with numerous floral tributes. So you can kind of see, I am kind of building a little understanding of Captain Carter's life through these clippings. Here we have the following year, some probate notice in the paper, and it's talking about the reading of his will, and he's leaving his estate of $90,000 to be divided among 2 sons, 5 daughters, and a granddaughter. It's the first time we learn now there's a 3rd generation, and it's a daughter. We're not sure how she's connected in yet, but as I'm building this tree, boy, that's going to be important to know. Now, this clipping, which is the following year, his children, in his honor, decided to donate a memorial window in Christ Church on River Road. I hope that church still stands. It would be so neat to go. I'm invested in Captain Carter's life now. I would like to see this window. But it says that the gift of their daughter and son-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. J.H. Cummings of Toronto, they donated a beautiful window, and it's placed in the eastern transept of the church near the pew, which was occupied by the Carters, who were members of Christ Church for 50 years. So, wow, what a load of information and things that really just build this narrative of his life. Well, the following year after that, without mention of the Carter's name at all, we see that the children, with both parents gone, have now listed the family home for rent. And we learned that they lived in an 8-roomed brick house in a good location on Morrison Street. Okay, just 2 more, and then we're going to go do some live stuff. But here is 20 years in 1946, 20 years after the death of Captain Carter. And as I was searching for Captain and RF and all those variations, I found his daughter's obituary. Do you remember we have seen Mr. and Mrs. J.H. Cummings several times now? Well, now we learn that the daughter is Agnes. And it says that she's passed away, and it talks about her children. She has children that are living in California, Los Angeles. It names them by name. It talks about her grandchildren. And then when we get down to here, it talks about her siblings. And she is survived by 2 sisters and a brother. So now we're starting to learn these women's name. We had seen Mr. and Mrs. Webster. We know Mr. Webster's name, but now we know it's Hazel. And she's living in California. So what am I going to do? I'm going to head over to those California papers and start searching for the Websters in California. And Blanche Carter, who is still probably never married, and Harry are at home. And then here's the children of Agnes. So this is great information. It even has her street address. And just a little side note, something I love to do because, that's actually the funeral home. But I love when I find a street address to go to Google Earth and see if that home still stands. I did that for Captain Carter just because I was curious, and it appears that the house still stands, but the numbering is different. So I'm not sure what number 12 was, but that street is just kind of older homes. So I think that the Carter's home's still standing. But you could do that when you find an address of your ancestor's home, go and look and see if it's still there, and you get a kind of, virtually take a tour around the neighborhood. Okay, on our final clipping for Richard Carter. This one was like the icing on the cake. It was so good. This is from 1966. So here it's 40 years past the death of Captain Carter. And that is another one of my hints. Sometimes we think, oh, our ancestor lived from 1880 to 1940, so I'm only going to search in that time frame. But so many times you might find amazing things outside of that time frame. In an area where I do a lot of research on my ancestors, they have a column in the paper that's 10 years ago today, 20 years ago today, up to like 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So I have found information about marriages and children in a look back newspaper where the original newspaper didn't survive. So you might be tempted to narrow your dates, but don't be afraid to extend beyond the dates of whoever you're researching lifetime. Because here we are in 1966, this a house was being torn down, and it's in, let me look at the Chippewa. There was a 100-year-old home in Chippewa being torn down. And somebody from the Historical Society decided that they should go see if there was anything of historical note in this home. And this is a terrible picture, but they found this old oil stove, an antique stove. And as they started looking at the name on the stove, they said that they saw that it was manufactured in Niagara Falls by R.F. Carter in the 1870s. So this reporter wanted to learn a little bit more about who R.F. Carter was. So she starts doing a little digging and discovers that R.F. Carter has one child still living in 1966. And her name's Hazel. And they track down Hazel, and she tells an incredible bio of her dad's life. Starting down here, we learn that she lives in Grimsby. I'm going to go back up to the top. And it says that Richard Carter was born in 1846 in London, and that his father was a carriage maker for Queen Victoria. And that the family immigrated to Canada in 1858, and it tells who Richard's siblings are and tells about his parents. It tells all about his business. This was an entrepreneurial guy. He was in a steam fitting business at the old record building on Park Street. He invented and had patented a gas machine that was on display at the Pan American Expo in Buffalo when President McKinley was assassinated in 1901. When the railroad came through, he built a home at 12 Morrison Street, and he lived there until he passed away in 1821. He was a 32nd degree Mason. He started the very first Clifton Volunteer Fire Department, and he was the chief for many years. He operated an amusement park where the Clifton House now stands, or used to stand. He was the mayor in Clifton, which then became Niagara Falls, and then he was a mayor again. He was a hydro commissioner. He talks about his the former Maid of the Mist had boats that operated. Apparently, there was one that operated in 1846, and he became determined that Niagara needed to have more tourism. And so he decided to build another boat. So he and his business partner in 1884 took out a $10,000 loan and built the Maid of the Mist. And then the next year, they built another one on the American Falls. And he made 60,000 trips in the Maid of the Mist without any accident. And then it says that he has 2 boats that were burned in 1955. Wow. So I'm going to want to go to 1955 papers and learn a little bit more about that. And then it said he had 5 daughters, and for the first time, we see all 5 of those daughters mentioned by their names: Emma, Agnes, Blanche, Martha, Fred Carter, Harry Carter, and all have passed away except for that one daughter. So you can see the amazing, let me stop that share for a minute. The amazing story we were able to construct from clippings. And and you know what we didn't even do? We didn't even go back over to London. It would have been fun to try to find his family and the papers there. But I want to go back to the homepage and kind of walk through a little bit of that. So let me get to the homepage here, and I'll share my screen. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the site a little more. Okay. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, you're seeing my homepage, right? All right, I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, all right. Okay, so on this homepage, I want to kind of walk you through some of the features that could help you. Under the search here, there is something called Browse. And when I click on the Browse, if I wanted to browse and see what papers were available in a specific area, I could go here and I could look at Canada and I could decide which province I wanted to search in, and I could go to Ontario and it shows me all the cities that have papers. And if I go to Niagara Falls, there's 3 papers right now in Niagara Falls. You'll see that one of these has a little yellow plus, and that's because that has papers that are still in copyright. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But you could see that you could walk through any town and see what papers are available. If I wanted to click on the paper, it would take me right to that paper's homepage of that paper. But right up here in the right, in the top corner, is something called Browse by Map. And where you have this unique situation where you are so close to the border, and this is true if you're like close on a province border or a state border, but as I zoom in, this tells me what papers are available in a map view. So as I go to Niagara Falls, I can kind of see that I've got papers up here in Niagara on the Lake and St. Catharines and Buffalo, and over here in, I don't know what that is, Cheektowaga. I probably said that wrong, but I can see what papers might be available, and I can, click onto any of those papers there. So being so close to the border, I'm going to want to be sure to check out these other papers that are so close. Okay, back on the home page, I can also go to the papers page and look at every paper that's on the site. And I can narrow that by a state or a province. If I were to go to Canada, again, here I could see, okay, there's 20 million pages in Ontario. I can click on that. It shows me the 110 papers that are in Ontario, and they're different places that I could find them, and the year range. So some of these, here's one that's 1859 to 1879 or 1900 to 1930. So you can kind of look through these and see which coverage, what date range. Some of them are a long span and some of them are just short span. It just kind of, like here we have 6 pages that survived 1825. So, you just don't know what you'll find there, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, back to the home page again. Clippings. I showed you how to make a clipping, but I want to show you that this is where you can access all your clippings. Actually, there's 2 places. You could do it here or here under, if you have a subscription, right here, you could also access your clippings. But when you click on that, it shows you everything that you have clipped. You can see I have clipped a lot of clippings. But if I have so many that, and I want to maybe, what if I clipped, well, let's just say Richard Carter, because I could put, I won't take the time to do that, but I could put in anything, and it's searching for my titles. So whatever I've titled it, I can search the titles there. But I can also search tags. So if you want to have a tag for each person or a tag for each family, I can search my tags here. And I could, that's a way for me to organize all of my clippings. You see that I have my clippings, but this is all clippings. This is clippings created by anybody who has a newspapers.com subscription. So, and you know what? You can do this without even having a subscription. You could go, because clippings are free, you could go to the newspapers.com homepage and look at all clippings. And let's say I wanted to search for something about the Halifax explosion. I could enter that in there and look at every clipping that's been created about the Halifax explosion. And I could click into that clipping and look at all of those clippings that are created. So I can look at my clippings and everybody else's clippings too. I do have an option if I want my clippings to be private, to categorize them as private so that others can't see. I've never had a need to want to do that, but you could do that if you wanted to. Okay, and our last on the homepage, the last thing that I wanted to show you was this thing called the topics page. And when you go to our topics page, this is a